But Bajora Sahib, yahan jahiye na. Aye. Come here. Sorry, go here. Sorry. What? Gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you for this book discussion. David Devadas' book, The Story of Kashmir. That is Facebook Live. Seriously, I wanted to announce that now all our programs, we do it on our website. We webcast them on our website, nehrumemorial.nic.in. It is there right now. And we also do it on our Facebook page, Facebook Live. So those of your friends who are not here, you would want them to be virtually here, please tell them to be so. David, of course, has been working in and on Kashmir for a very, very long time. We were discussing his articles written prior to the troubles, 1988 onwards as an example. He's, of course, been living there off and on from 1995. He's been teaching variously, visiting professor at Jamia. He was a senior fellow at Nehru Memorial. He's been associated with the Islamic University of Science and Technology in Kashmir. And so he's been very actively involved, not initially starting off as a journalist, while he remains a journalist to heart, which you can make out from his meticulous noting of details, which is, of course, a very important thing. But he's also now become a lot more analytical because a book gives you far more space to be analytical about than, obviously, a column of 1,200 words or even of 2,000 words. Of course, now our columns have got reduced to 500, 600 words. So it's more of headlining than real writing on it, which is really a tragedy. But I'll not take... I'm also grateful to General Gurmit Singh for being here. He served in Kashmir for a very long, long time. He'll bring his perspective. Also grateful to Aditya Sinha for being here. Again, somebody who knows the area very well, having worked on it for a long time. So let me not take... And before we move on, my standard announcement, please put your mobile phones on switch off mode, as the airlines say, or in our case, you can actually do it on sound off. That's pretty good, ringer off mode. So David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shakti, for that very kind introduction. Let me begin by presenting a copy of the book to you.
Let this be recorded. Thank you.
It is my third. Thank you also to Uttam Sinha and all the others, all of your colleagues at NMML for having organized this. I feel at home here, as you just mentioned.
Those who are young and supple-limbed, the floor is yours, so that some of us who need a little more comfortable sitting can use the chairs. You're very home at home.
Yes, because I have been a senior fellow here in this very room. In March 2011, I said in the course of a lecture that a triad of challenges faced India and that they would converge. One was youth anger in Kashmir, two, Pakistan's animosity, and three, China's desire to keep India down. All three trends had become manifest in 2008. The transfer over land, the agitations over the land transfer, the Mumbai attacks, and the PLA's extended intrusion in Ladakh, followed by a refusal by China to give visas on the Indian passports of citizens from the state. I wrote in an article in the Hindustan Times on the 3rd of April 2013 that, and allow me to read the opening paragraph because I think it's so relevant even today, 6 years later. And I quote, "A new militancy has emerged in Kashmir. 9 attacks by gunmen were reported during March. The boldest in a long time was a suicide attack on CRPF men on March the 13th. And this is March the 13th, 2013. The combination of two major factors makes this a more dangerous round than the one that began in 1989 and ended in 2006. The first factor is the impending withdrawal of the NATO forces from Afghanistan. It could have a violent impact on Kashmir. Again, this rings so true again this summer. There are signs that different factions of the Taliban are jockeying to regain a foothold there, and some of them have announced their intention to turn their attention to Kashmir. Pakistan's army too will surely try and regain control over post-war Afghanistan if the army manages to install pliable favorites in the next Pakistan government. And also regains at least partial control over Afghanistan, it may encourage the jihadi forces that have already set their sights on Kashmir. They will want to do so even if only to keep those jihadis off Pakistan's streets. The second factor that has made the current situation extremely volatile is the alienation of large sections of Kashmiri youth. This was written in 2013. This book was published last year, in which I've gone into factors that have shaped the anger, and in fact I've called it the generation of rage in Kashmir. Remember, this is a generation that was born in a time of violence. In fact, two generations, almost 70% of the population. But when I wrote this in 2013, such was the general discourse that the editors published it as a side article with a headline that did not reflect any urgency. And when I gave that lecture here in this room in 2011, the Home Secretary of the time was sitting somewhere there, and during questions he called my presentation simplistic. He wasn't impressed. In fact, I had interactions with very senior people in policy making. In fact, I think it was the first day of 2015, and someone came up to me and said, "What do you think is going to happen?" And I repeated much of this, because this is what I've been saying for the last 7 years. And he said, yeah, you've been saying that. So I'm glad that at least, I'm sadly glad, let's say, that at least it's being taken seriously now. About time. Now, the insights that I have brought to bear in my articles and my books have come from an intimate association with the grassroots within Kashmir. I have lived with families in villages and in suburbs, in uptown and in the suburbs and in the inner city areas since 1995. And I supplemented the insights I had gained through these interviews, or gained by living with these people, with interviews with major players in the militancy, in separatist and mainstream politics, and in the administration and the forces. It is from that wealth of information and insight that this book emerged. And I dare say it is the most comprehensive account of the Kashmir story since 1930, with a capsuled history of in the first chapter. It narrates the geopolitics, the politics, and the social and cultural changes that have taken place in Kashmir over the past 90 or so years. The connection I have made in this book between the end of the battle for Kabul in April 1992 and the green signal which the ISI finally gave to Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Harkatul Jihad Islami to function in Kashmir. And I have documented it with names of particular officers, names of those who were in charge of these forces that had been urging the ISI to give them permission to come to Kashmir. And I have talked about how they came, according to the information I gleaned from the ground, first in December 1992, a few months after the fall of Kabul in April 1992. And I've recorded in detail how seriously and unhappily his leaders, including Sayyid Salahuddin and Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, how seriously a view they took of this development at that time. I've also recorded the extent to which activists of various groups set up kangaroo courts in parts of rural Kashmir to impose their own version of Sharia law on hapless women and men. It is very important to understand what has happened in Kashmir beyond the various popular and even propagandist discourses, and to learn from past happenings and past mistakes. My take is that far too often the story of Kashmir is taken to be the story of the India-Pakistan tussle over Kashmir. And this is a mistake, because that, of course, is a very major part of the story, but it's only a part of the story. There's much more to be learned and understood from the changes that have taken place in society, in culture, the kinds of ideological movements and pressures that have operated since 1930, at least. 1931 is when Kashmiris rose in rebellion against the Dogras in a very major way, and Sheikh Abdullah became Sheikh Abdullah at the age of 26. He became the leader, the mass iconic hero of the Kashmiri people in 1931. And in one of the last sections of this book, I have actually compared some of the leaders of that phase with the leaders of the current phase, and talked about how the unfortunate fact is that Sheikh Abdullah was the iconic leader in 1931, and Burhan Wani has been the iconic leader of youth, of young people, in the last few years. And it is partly a reflection of the times, that around the world, people are becoming more and more, to some extent nihilistic, and to some extent withdrawing into primal identities. And this is one of the factors and problems that we all face across the world, but particularly in South Asia, because in South Asia, I think we have more than in most parts of the world, a much more complex sociological reality. I would like to leave as much time as possible for discussion, so I'll leave some of the points that I've made to present to you for later. I'll just say that a part of this book was published earlier as In Search of a Future, The Story of Kashmir. That was the title of the book, which was published in 2007. That book did very well, and yet it didn't fit with any of the agendas and the discourses that were common at that time. In fact, the publisher, a very, very renowned publisher, told me when it was about to go to press that this is not going to suit either side, and it is going to anger every side. And I said, well, what do we do? He said, well, that's the best kind of book. Now, it might be the best kind of book, but if a book doesn't suit any of the agendas that are already in place, it tends to fall between the stools. And what happened was that this book went out of print, even though there was demand for it. And over the last year or so, I've realized that the demand has been increasing. Over the last couple of years, in fact, since it's been out of print, I've been told by friends living abroad that they found it on Amazon priced at $200, and another said 80 euros. Then in this summer, rupee prices, somebody told me that they had obtained a copy for 5,000 rupees, a copy which was dog-eared and with notes in the margins. And then soon after, the price went up to 24,720 on Amazon for a used copy. And then somehow someone was selling a new copy for 65,000 rupees in, I think, November or December, just before this came out. So that was the pressure that made me expand. It substantially expanded. And 5 new chapters and more. In this, it's brought it up to date. And I've also used the opportunity to compare the uprisings of the last few years, 2008, when there was a tremendously volatile uprising after the transfer of land to the Shri Amarnath Shrine Board. Then 2010, there was another huge uprising, stone pelting on the streets. And then again 2016, after Burhan Wani was killed. I have compared these uprisings with the uprising of 1931 to try and understand the kinds of factors that have been common and that have shaped these various uprisings. It's only when I began research that I realized that the story of Kashmir doesn't just begin in 1947. that the story of modern Kashmir, of Kashmir's aspirations in the modern age, begin from at least 1931. And the sad thing is that very many of us do not have much knowledge of that or any background in that, and we see Kashmir too often from the prism of the India-Pakistan tussle. In fact, soon after that first book was published, I got a telephone call out of the blue from someone very senior in government who said, "I'm reading your book and it's given me many, many new insights. I always thought of this as an Indo-Pakistan problem." Now, this was a very senior officer in the Home Ministry. And it is unfortunate because it is inadequate to address what is happening in Kashmir and to make policies unless one understands Kashmir for its own sake, apart from the Indo-Pakistan tussle or any of the rest of the geopolitics around it. Now, of course, it's become part of a new great game which extends across Central Asia. So one of the things about this book, of course, is one of the highlights, of course, is this description of the 1990s and the militancy of that period and the counterinsurgency measures and the politics, not only in the 1990s, but the factors that led to it in the 1980s, the various factors. But I've also gone into the complexities of politics within the state in the 1930s and 1940s. And this is very important to understand because when we are talking India-Pakistan, we very often talk past each other, and one of the reasons is that Indians know a very different version of the situation in Kashmir before 1947 from what Pakistanis know. So I've gone into the formation of the Muslim Conference in 1932 and how it metamorphosed into the National Conference in 1939, and then the Muslim Conference came up again in 1940. So most Pakistanis know that there was one major political party in the state, which was called the Muslim Conference, and its great tallest leader was Chaudhry Abbas. And most Indians know there was one party across Jammu and Kashmir, which is the National Conference, and its tallest leader was Sheikh Abdullah. Now, not only is this, and therefore we are not able to engage with each other in any constructive way. It's very important to understand the complexities of what had happened there, and also the complexities of Kashmiri ambitions and aspirations. For example, I discovered, and I was quite amazed when I discovered this in the course of research, that Sheikh Abdullah had reached out to Mr. Jinnah as well as to Nehru. He had made friends with Nehru, but he also reached out to Mr. Jinnah, went to Mumbai to meet him and went and asked him to come to Kashmir. Mr. Jinnah came to Kashmir. All of that you'll find if you read the book. One other thing that I'd like to point out is that I have tried to make this a story in a very, very real sense of the people of Kashmir. So I've spoken to prime ministers and ministers and administrators and officers and militant commanders and leaders of the Hurriyat Conference, etc. But I've also interwoven into the main story the biographies of 3 Kashmiris. One of them was a rural activist of the National Conference. Another is Shahidul Islam, who is currently in Tihar jail, who became the commander of Hezbollah in the 90s, and then secretary to the Mirwais in about a decade ago and until very recently. Perhaps he continues, even though he's in jail now. And the third, a woman whose story brings out, she was very, she told me her story, and later her relatives more than her were very, very uneasy about having me publish it. But this is a story that brings out vividly how terribly any war situation plays out in the lives of ordinary women in particular, and in society, of course, in general. So let me skip over some of the other points, except to say that I have also gone into the ways in which Lashkar and Harkatul Jihad Islami and Jaish-e-Mohammed, I have a little bit about the Jaish-e-Mohammed founder, Masood Asar, when he was in jail and happened to be in the next cell from Shahidul Islam. So through the lives of these three Kashmiris, real Kashmiris, I have been able to shed light in a micro way on what has been happening and the ways, because Shahidul Islam also went and participated in the Afghan jihad and was trained in Pakistan. And so through his story, I've been able to bring alive, to the extent that I could, in a narrative form, the story of Kashmir so there's the macro history as well as the micro stories that bring that, I hope, to life. May I request my colleagues on the panel, General Gurmit Singh has known Kashmir very closely as a military hand. He was corps commander there, and before that had commanded a brigade, I think, as well as he was GOC, and I think he was there for 6 or 7 years continuously, and then became deputy chief of the army staff. And then I'm going to turn to my friend Aditya, who has not only been a very fine journalist for so many years and editor of DNA, but has written several books on Kashmir, some by himself and some along with Mr. Dullat. But we'll turn to him after General Gurmit has said a few words.
Thank you so much. There are only two turbaned gentlemen here, and I intend taking only 12 minutes. I have been in the valley for 10 years. I went as a brigadier and came back as a corps commander in the valley. 10 intense years. And I believed in one aspect of life, that when you talk what you know. But when you listen or read, you come to know what you don't know. In fact, that was the perspective. One always wondered that God has given a turban to put on. It is to keep your ears clean and nice and healthy so you can listen. In fact, this book is a beautiful research, hard work and sincere job which has been done by David. 503 pages, 4 chapters, 34 sub-chapters, spanned from 1925 to 2018, 93 years, put into 7 time periods. 93 means about 4-5 generations. And its story is not a history. And I'm so happy that anchor of his research has been society, culture, politics, geopolitics, and aspiration of the people. Security is not the word in this book, in the bigger plane of it. But somewhere the insecurity of the people has been covered very beautifully. In fact, one has always been inquisitive to do a research on the cognitive domain of Jammu and Kashmir in particular. When one was in Srinagar for a long period, one felt that you are in something like a pot, a pot in the kitchen, and what is getting cooked inside, or the temperature inside, or the turmoil inside, does the people outside that cattle know what is happening? I think you got to be there, and that's what the beauty of David is, that he's been there on the ground. He's spoken to people. It is actually giving an excellent expose of how a Kashmiri thinks. I myself, as a military man, did a very deep research to find out what is the Kashmiri psyche, what is the Kashmiri DNA, how does a Kashmiri think? Because you cannot dominate the cognitive domain unless you are master of reading the perceptions. You know what beliefs are. You know what myths are. When I look at this word belief, the center word is lie. On one side is B and one side is F. In fact, I have had a great pleasure in listening to so many Kashmiri gentlemen. Whenever I spoke one-to-one with them, the story was totally different. When I listened to 2 and more, it was totally different. what is there in the mind and the heart of a Kashmiri, you got to talk one to him. And in fact, in Kashmir, I saw one thing for sure. I don't know what was written in Bible about neighbor, but here neighbor is a very dangerous man. You don't know how is he looking at you, whom he's going to give information. You're very scared about it. That's why in all the parties and all Vazwan party, big parties, next day in the morning they throw the rice and the other leftover things outside into the lane or the little by-lane which is there to show that we prepared so much of it and all. There's the element of showing off. In fact, in my, when I go through the book, it reminds of every gentleman that I spoke to. And that's where I find this book is very touching to me. He has spoken to the key personalities who shaped the thoughts in Kashmir. He spoke to all the leadership, all the generation of leadership. He's spoken to all the people who've been painted or who've been categorized as inimical elements. He's given a very honest, sincere representation of theirs. I find this a very balanced and a mature way of putting it across. He's not gone with a bias. He's gone on the respect to the gentleman who told him the story. Also, he is at the right places. He's given the cardinal references to the events and the decisions which were taken. In fact, 4 anchors that he's identified for himself, that is 1931, 13th of the month of that, 13th? July, March, July. 13th is a bad number as such, 13th July 1931, and what happened at that time. Then 1990, we all are witness to what happened. What happened to the Kashmiri Pandits thereafter. 2008 and 2016. He's taken these cardinalities and he's woven the story around that to see how they have changed the perception of the people. In fact, it is very important for us to understand that what is the thinking profiling and what is the thinking changes which are going on there. Because you, like as a part of the security, one felt that security method or your engagement there is a management. It's a management of upgraded law and order or security management. But finally, all of us have to look for solution. I find there is a requirement for a social engineering. One is actually looking for a social reformer to come in there and bring in this new thought which is required and all. Because there is a change, there is a perceptual change in the thinking processes and all. And that's what he's beautifully brought on in his book. And I must compliment him that he's been honest, frank. Somewhere I felt that his story is from the mind of Kashmiri people. I wish he had also taken the story from the point of view of establishment, state, security personnel, other practitioners out there. Actually, one looks at the present moment, the problem of radicalization, recruitment, and then there is a desire in that the things should change. So beautifully he's brought out this aspect of woman. What's the role of mother and the woman out there? I think this is a need of the hour. I think every individual in Kashmir has got the highest respect for his mother. Women have not participated the way they should have participated. In fact, when I look at this word pine, I was thinking that women must participate and must have the leverage in this Kashmiri society. P for participation, I for initiative, N for networking, E for empowerment. For what? S for solution. This book has got a pine leaf out here. But this pine is ulta. My pine is Seedha. My wife tells me, always ensure that it's Seedha. And if you look at this beautiful picture, it tells the whole story. It can tell you, looking at the thing, which month did it fall. If you look at the color and the whiteness and the problems which this pine leaf I had the same problem which Kashmiri individual is having today. Actually, my heart beats for Kashmiri Awam. Anybody who comes and disturbs the privation of an individual or of the family, you get pained. Therefore, there is a responsibility of each of the practitioner of security, governance, administration out there to ensure that the respect and the privation of every person is put there. That's how, in his book, he is at various places shown what the anguish in the mind of the people. I think somehow these times of proxy war, hybrid war, propaganda, and intentions across, and many inimical elements, I would say, they have tried to play with the psychology, with the thought, with the inner thinking process. Someone has tried to tamper with the subconsciousness of a Kashmiri person. In fact, this book gives out how the changes have come out. I'm very happy about it because one feels that the social engineering, cognitive domain, battle of perceptions have got to be corrected. In fact, I look at 3S. Actually, his book is 503 pages. 5 is very poised to us as a Sikh person, Punjab. 3 is Lord Shiva's blessing in this area. Actually, in Kashmir, there is a unlimited blessing of Lord Shiva. There's an unlimited blessing of Sufis. There's unlimited blessing of the Sikh gurus in this area. One wonders, why should this paradise actually have a pain? Why should the problem be there? Why the curse is there? Word curse also has got you are in it. See, you are. It is telling that you are responsible and you are the one who will find the solution for it. Actually, all these thoughts have been generated to a security man by this book. And my compliments to him. Because as a security man, when I open my mouth, it's all about Pakistan, ISI, things like that and all. But I think somewhere the center of gravity of counterterrorism is Kashmiri Awam, that innocent Kashmiri Awam. Look at his compulsion. Look at his problem. I've had a large number of friends in Kashmir and I've been in touch with them. From 2004 onward, I've been in touch with them. And when this Muzaffarabad Chalo was there, so I rang up a gentleman. I said, "Kya kar raha hai?" He says, "Sab Muzaffarabad ja raha hu." I said, "You are such a..." I really loved him. He was a very good person. I said, "Kyun? Kis liye? Kya ho gaya?" He said, "Nahi sab ja raha hu." I said, "Sweetheart, you are such a dependable man. I always got a deep respect, but kya? Why this decision?" He says, "Ab kuch pata nahi kya ho raha hai. So main ghar mein aaya, apna saman rakha hai and I'm about to go." Actually, this decision is subconscious. Society has compelled him to think subconsciously. Can we correct that? I think my biggest challenge from this book is that it must reach hand of every practitioner, every security person, every planner, and take a cue from this. And my deep thank to him for producing this book to tell the story, whose story people don't want to listen. And I've crossed 12 minutes. Thank you.
That's a dangerous juncture. Thank you very much for your insights and words. May I request Aditya Sinha to speak next?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, David. Thanks, General Saab. Ever since Thursday, with the suicide bombing attack on the CRPF convoy, I find everybody is filled with questions. And I'm sure all of you here have questions. So, I'm going to be brief. Okay, I'll just make a few points. The first point, of course, is about the book. I enjoyed David's book. I enjoyed David's earlier book. David, your book, I don't want to sound pompous, but it was kind of like Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, because, there are a lot of characters. Kashmir is a small place, and there are a lot of characters. And it's a book of moving parts. All the characters are constantly, it's a small, as I said, a conservative place, and everybody knows each other. and everybody knows what everybody else is up to, and everybody is suspicious of one another, which is a thing that has been exploited both by the agencies on our side as well as on the other side. But anyway, I mean, as far as the reading experience is concerned, I enjoyed that immersion into a sort of a play with many characters, and all of them alive, and all of them with agency. You know, I congratulate you on that. The other thing that I made note of when reading at the beginning of the book, David goes into quite a bit of detail trying to give a psychological profile. I think the General Sahib also mentioned that about cognitive domination or engagement rather. I think David took a lot of history and tried to shape a psychological profile, which many journalists like David, who covered Kashmir in the 90s, for instance, we always try to do because of the Cold War between India and Pakistan. Everybody was so suspicious of one another, and it sort of you can say produced a warp of individual personalities, because nobody could know who the other person was. And so people were more relaxed. Each Kashmiri was more relaxed talking to more than one Kashmiri rather than one Kashmiri, because he didn't know that other Kashmiri, who is he, going to go and tell what they have spoken about. And I think David did a pretty creditable job of that. I mean, I myself have never tried it, and many people have, they have glossed over it or resorted to cliches and stereotypes. But I think he's tried to give it a lot more complexity, shades of gray. So again, David must be commended for that. Now, having said that, I also, David, I feel that in this day and age, a little more attention has to be paid to the Kashmiri Pandit in any book that you write. It's not just a political agenda. I think it's something you just can't put in the margin or as a footnote or as an afterthought. That's I think my even though I'm not nobody would claim that I'm a spokesman for the Pandits, but they have. As you pointed out, this is an age of tribalism and nationalisms, and so that's something. The other thing is that now I know that peace is a dirty word, but there had been a peace lobby built up between India and Pakistan. And though you said that the India-Pakistan tussle is only a small part of the story, it is still a part. And the peace lobby, the Aman Ki Asha, which is built up not just by candle holders at Wagah, but people like Sati Lamba, for instance, right? The peace lobby, you may have noticed in the last few years, has withered. I would have liked to have read more about that, particularly since in the last few years, a sort of one of the reasons, in my humble opinion, for the deterioration of the situation is a purely militaristic approach to the problem. Now, many people nowadays, it's fashionable to say that, no, we must do it like this, we must do it. And my apologies to, former general, retired general rather.
Not at all.
But the thing is that we have an example in Afghanistan where a military solution by the United States was sought, and the United States, the most powerful country in the world, could not obtain it. And now Donald Trump is, ducking his tail between his legs and trying to get out of there as fast as possible. Handing the country over to the Taliban even, and which has given space to the Pakistan Army, to GHQ, and that is no doubt a factor in the events that have happened in the last the recent past, or even on Thursday or yesterday, the shootout that led to the death of a major. Sadly, he was among 4 army personnel and 3 Jaish-e-Mohammed militants. Of course, that would make this a sprawling book, but some engagement of the peace lobby. Now, another one quibble I had, David. David, I hope you don't mind me, bringing up my quibbles at this talk. But the other one I had is that You mentioned at the end of the book, he's brought up Burhan Wani, and he has likened Burhan Wani to Sheikh Abdullah. I don't know about this. One is...
May I just interject here?
Sure.
There are 2 or 3 things that I wanted to respond to. One, I believe that I've written far more forcefully about the plight of the Pandits. In 1990, I roamed around Habakadal in February 1990 in my jeans and with a notebook alone, when even auto drivers were a little uneasy about going into downtown. Apart from that, in the book, there is a chapter on what the Pandits went through in 1990, and with graphic details about some of the most horrific killings and other events that led to a very, very large section of that population leaving. The other thing that you're talking about in terms of the peace lobbies, over the 90s and thereafter, and particularly in this new century, there's been a lot of suspicion, and both of you have spoken about the suspiciousness even of individuals and of among neighbors. There's been so much suspicion about one peace lobby or another on every side, and there's so much Gebat is so much a part of the weft and woof of their cultural fabric that there's so much talk about one or other peace lobby being actually supported by some agency, not just India or Pakistan, but also other agencies from different parts of the world. So I have avoided going into that. It would take a whole lot of time and energy to deal with that. So
okay.
that's the...
No, David, I'm not looking to pick a fight with you.
No. I'm sure you're not.
David and I once shared a room in Kathmandu, so we have a... When we went with Gujral, he was the PM.
When was that?
97.
Oh.
So anyway, the thing about the you have mentioned at the end about the Amarnath agitation and post 2014 about the plan or the idea of resettling Pandits in the valley. But this is something that has not been explored because I think that's an idea that brings. Of course, your reference to the events of 1990, which were quite horrific for the Pandit community, are there and also very lucidly relayed to the reader. This is something I thought that because recently that with these two, both are linked. I think to the Kashmiri paranoia about demographic change. And anyway, as I said, I don't want to... about the peace suspicions about peace lobbies, yeah, you're right. But then, the Hurriyat, as so vividly in your very fly-on-the-wall kind of an account of Hurriyat meetings. I really enjoyed it. It's like reading Bob Woodward. You can see that there's so much distrust in the Hurriyat, right? So much suspicions in the Hurriyat themselves. So just because people are suspicious of one another doesn't mean that I feel that I would rather have seen that. But anyway, let's leave that aside, or if somebody wants to pick it up later. The other thing was about, as I said, Sheikh Abdullah and Burhan Wani. Now, which you mentioned in the last chapter, and the thing is that Burhan Wani right now, because he died, is more like a Maqbool Bhatt was in the 90s, in that kind of icon. Sheikh Abdullah, of course, didn't die. And he was able to, he had a lot of struggles with New Delhi. He had a long career with a lot of different facets. When he returned in 75 after the Accord, then it was a big letdown for a lot of Kashmiri Muslims. Mm-hmm. So I think I can't, at least in this writing, cannot accept that parallel. The other reason is that, recently in the last couple of years, as you no doubt know, things have moved so fast in Kashmir, as far as personalities are concerned, that Mirwais is seen as an out-and-out Indian, right? And then Gilani, who used to be the hardliner of the hardliners. Now, even Gilani, nobody is paying attention to. You have these kids, like now they are these mad boys with bombs in cars. And they are, the policies chosen by the governments of India, Pakistan, have now become hostage to these boys who, they don't accept authority of Gilani or anybody else. I don't know even they accept the authority of Masood Azhar, other than to take guidance from whoever strategists are, linked or getting funded by Jaish-e-Mohammed or that may be. So I think that is a. I made my point. The Burhan Wani is a flash in the pan. I mean, there more people will come up and come out, and it's somebody who is able to give a political program eventually that can be made a parallel to Sheikh Abdullah. And none of these guys, if you read the book, it's quite clear that they are so, the Hurriyat are so sunk in bitter rivalries and stuff. So, anyway, I think this is more than brief remarks than I had intended. The last thing I wanted to mention is that, last year I published a book with a former RAW chief, A.S. Dullat, called The Spy Chronicles. And it was with a former ISI chief, Asad Durrani. And the book launch was in Delhi. And one young man came to one journalist came, and his name is Shujat Bukhari. And Shujat Bukhari got very angry. Farooq was on the dais, and Dr. Manmohan Singh, and Mr. Dullat, of course. And anyway, so he got angry, and he stood up, and he said that a generation, as David mentioned, a generation has grown up, has been born under the shadow of the barrel of the gun. So he said that, we don't love India. We don't, because Dr. Farooq saying that, Kashmiris, we love India, but we're having these problems. And he said, and then, a couple of weeks later, he was killed. It's still, the way he was killed is mysterious. I'm not saying that, government killed him or this or that. Obviously some assholes with a gun killed him. Pardon my language. But the thing is that, this Kashmiri society is on is like a, suicide bomber, the whole society. Shujat Bukhari was an asset to his society, whichever way you look at it. He was an asset, and he was killed. Boys have become so desperate. They have become they're filled with so much hopelessness that they are ramming cars filled with bombs into CRP convoys. So,
thanks, Aditya. That's a very important point that you've raised about Shujat's assassination. Oh,
no. I
just wanted to. Okay, but that's been actually 14 minutes.
I apologize for not having been brief.
Please, that's good, because all very pertinent points. Let me just say that assassinations have become very, very major. Have played a major part, not just in killing a particular voice, or stilling a particular voice, but in killing an idea sometimes, and in spreading terror in a whole large group or social sector. So I've described in detail the assassinations, or what led up to the assassinations of Abdul Ghani Lone Saab and the previous Mirwais. Shujat also we could go into, but it's still too fresh. Let me just clarify before opening it for discussion that I have not sought to draw a parallel between Sheikh Abdullah and Burhan. At least that's, maybe I didn't write it with enough finesse. What I wanted to do was to draw a contrast between the youth hero of that uprising and the youth hero of a very recent uprising. A contrast in the time and a contrast in the spirit of the age. Thank you very much, both of you, for your excellent interventions, your remarks. Your points are well taken. Thank you so much. I've learnt a lot. Because both of you know the situation from very different angles. But let us bring in a few other voices, if there are any who would like to. I think I saw your hand first, Khalid. So let a Kashmiri speak next.
I'm a little tickled when we talk about Shujat Bukhari and we talk about things in a very convoluted and a shrouded manner. What's the shame in admitting that he was killed by Pakistan and he was killed for creating a scenario for peace? We talked about peace lobbies and how...
No shame at all, no shame at all.
And we talked about peace lobbies. We talked about how peace lobbies are shaped and how they're discredited. We should acknowledge it.
Fine.
There's been no acknowledgement anywhere. And I don't know if your book does that acknowledgement, but I as a Kashmiri have an acknowledgement that he was there for peace. He for a year tried his best going to Dubai, in Delhi, everywhere to create a narrative for peace, and he was bumped off with that. Don't call them boys with guns. That's an understatement.
The two gentlemen next to you, one after another, and then the gentleman here.
Yeah, General Singh. Sir, it is said that there are three hotspots in this world. One is Palestine, second is Tibet, third one is Kashmir. And three problems are altogether different. Do you think we can resolve problems in the way Germany has resolved or other countries are being resolved? Like, Hong Kong and Taiwan being resolved. Taiwan is still... Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Actually, I have three questions. You may respond to any of them. One is for the general.
Very briefly, if you could.
Yes, be brief. Now they say that we want Rafale jets. Are they designed to counter China or Pakistan? Because some people like to say that Pakistan is just a distraction. Would you agree that Pakistan is our main enemy and China is a distraction? In this respect, I believe 186,000 bulletproof vests were ordered 2 years ago. They've still not arrived. Just a couple of Rafale jets would probably get 40,000 bulletproof vests. Aren't they needed on the border? That is for you. And secondly, also, I remember seeing General Hasnan on TV and he was embracing the local Kashmiris. Could that not have been carried on by our army? What happened to those, gestures? And one more question for David. When you talk about women, I have heard that when a son goes and loses his life or he murders someone and comes back, he is treated as a hero by the mother. In other words, the pity that we have for the mothers of losing their sons is probably exaggerated because the hero worship overtakes any loss of a grievance that
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
You see, I have not read your book, Ms. Devadas, but I wanted to just ask you whether that landmark, Tyndale Biscoe's Kashmir to Sunshine and Shade, what was mentioned there, or the Kashmiri psyche, both Muslims and the Pandits, can we relate? Have you been able to bring in at least some inputs from there? Of course, that is in an old context. In the late 19th century, it was written.
Not inputs from there, but similar discourse, yes. The one behind you and then the lady. The one behind first? Yes. Yes.
In view of your vast knowledge and research into this Kashmir issue, I just want to know how do you look at government's recent decision to withdraw security from Kashmiri leaders?
Right. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask you, there is Shah Faisal expressed this opinion that the political space has been abdicated in Kashmir and it has been occupied by the forces, the police and the army. As a consequence, some of the questions that have been raised here on the peace movement, on women, on missing youngsters and so on, I think would fit into this formulation that he made that all political forces should reclaim this space, as you have shown in your first book. I read both your books, by the way, not at 6,000 rupees, but from the library.
I'm so glad. Yes, sir.
Sir, I just want to ask you, how will Kashmir be used for winning this election?
So I have a question, one for the author and one for the man in uniform who spent years in Valley, and one for the journalist.
Yes, Sanjeev.
The first question is...
Could you just restrict it to one, because we've got several questions already.
Okay, then I'm asking you, we as Indians in Kashmir are fighting for land, or are we fighting for people? Attached with this question is, we are fighting against what idiom? And who is our enemy over there?
Right. Let's just deal with these questions and then see if we can come back for another round, because we've got so many. Let me take a few of them before my colleagues come in. I think they can be bunched up to some extent in terms of we're talking about the security forces and their presence. My sense is that, and I've made this point in my earlier book, The Generation of Rage in Kashmir, that once a security force deployment takes place or a certain special law is brought into force, it tends to develop a life of its own. And there is an inertia in government among many of those who man the different offices regarding removing those. So it becomes almost like a permanent fixture. And that was part of the problem in about a decade ago. I think 2005, 2006, 2007, there was a tremendous opportunity when people by and large in Kashmir had stopped giving shelter, to forget about coming out to pelt stones and save militants caught up in an encounter. They had stopped giving shelter to militants in their homes or giving food to them. And that was a time when the counterinsurgency apparatus should have been eased to a tremendous level, I think very substantially. And the special laws should also have been amended and removed. We've had AFSPA imposed right across the state from 2001 onwards. Now, maybe at a certain point it may have been required, but in a district like Leh and a district like even Kargil and Kathua, surely we need a rethink at some point. The problem is that many of those in authority tend to be scared of taking a decision that might get them into trouble. So they don't want to withdraw those things. So I think that's one of the very important things that we need to take into account, and that I hope answers your question regarding the political space and the security forces space. Regarding women as turning, a point has been made by both my colleagues on the panel about a single Kashmiri saying something one-to-one and a group. And in a situation like that, there is a tremendous pressure. And it might often be that in certain situations, I don't think one can discount at all the pain that any parent goes through over the loss of a child. And that's a pain that lasts forever. I don't think that one can understate that pain. And whatever positions that anyone takes are taken either in the heat of the moment or in a certain situation where a discourse, a common discourse in the community and in society is very prominent. I believe very clearly that the issue should be the people of Kashmir and not the land, and that we must be very, very clear about this. Would any of you like to add to these points? I think you would agree with me on some of these.
Best response always is, I agree with you. I'm very happy that Khalid raised this point. He talked about Sujat Bukhari. He was a very close friend. In fact, 2014 we had this Kiran attack by the Pakistani commandos and terrorists combined. Something was published by his newspaper, which I thought was not correct. So I sent a message to him. I said, can we talk? He came next day. We had a cup of tea. We spoke. I said, I'll tell you everything that I know and my intentions, my perceptions clearly on this incident. And so beautifully next day, he exactly gave out the way it is. And in number of discussions that I had with him later, I found he was positive, dynamic, and he was a participant to finding a solution. In fact, I felt very pained when he was killed. And so boldly he said it was the handiwork of the ISI and the Pakistan, because, we have to walk to the culture of peace. We have to walk into culture of normal social engineering in the valley. We have to break that cycle of curse. We need this for the families out there. Secondly, although this point is emotive because it has been added on to social media, and I don't know how many tweets and Facebook and other would have gone into it. And in the cognitive domain, in the perception management, manufacturing, in the fake industry, in the distorted industry of the information, they invested so much of money of making Burhan Wani what they are trying to project. I was there in the valley. For me, he was just a terrorist. During my tenure, we missed him 3-4 times. And every time I told my boss, I said, don't worry. Terrorist has got a shelf life. Maximum, he will survive 3-4 years. Don't worry about it. Keep attempting it, but ensure that there should be no collateral damage, no privation of any of the awam should be disturbed, and do it in a professional way. What is professional way? Professional way is that concise, precise, and surgically you do it. Your one bullet should be able to take on one terrorist. If you fire another one, then that affects of you being a not professional. Second is, you said, sir, regarding the options the world over, how they deal with the insurgency, sir. How does China deal with, I have visited Urumqi in Xinjiang, how they deal with the Islamic fundamentalism out there. Hard, absolutely hard decision. I've been to Israel just about 3-4 months back, and for them it's a matter of survival. You do something and they will just take you out. Ruthlessness. You look at the Pakistan itself, how they dealt with the terrorists who were opposing the government and the centrality out there. They went with the aircraft. They went with the articles. They were ruthless. Our strategic culture has been different. We are looking at the long-term perspective. To me, the center of gravity of counter-terrorism is awam. I don't want to make more terrorists by making mistake on a person who can be dealt in a more professional way. In fact, you spoke about my predecessor, General Hasnan, for whom I got a very deep respect. And he beautifully initiated contact, milap, sadbhavna in a very nice way. And all of us, we have carried on to the same path. Aim has been how to assist the governance and administration there. But it is not the task of army. It is only assisting them. After all, in fact, when you look at the solution parameters, in the end of it, somebody has got to be responsible for governance, administration, law and order. Somebody has got to ensure that the education, employment, that is done. In fact, while I was in Urumqi, in the evening, I found there were thousands of people in a square out there. So, it's a communist country. I asked somebody, "Itne log kyun ikathe hain?" That was the inquisitiveness within myself. I said, "Why so many people in the evening out here?" He says, "Sir, they collect everybody and they got a system of keeping them busy. They were dancing there, this, that and all." We have to keep our youth busy, fruitfully. That is what the requirement. What does he do after 6 o'clock, after taking bath and combing his hair? What does he do after that? In fact, somebody is misguiding the youth out there. Actually, to me, the two segments of the population, youth and women, we need to help them out. We honestly need to help them out. In fact, two very big questions, massive question, and I don't have the capacity of dealing with it. But fortunately, I'm retired. I'm not the spokesman of the army, so I can give my mind on that. Yes, China is the primary threat. This is exactly what 1998 George Fernandez said, very boldly. And you must know what's your primary threat. There are no two ways about it. But there is an irritative threat. In fact, I went to Pakistan twice as a Major General. Second time I went, we went and after doing the official job and all, we went to Lahore. So we had taken around Lahore and all. And there was a person who was conducting us. And the moment I was sitting in my car, I told him, just out of a normal communication which you do, I said, Janab, aapko kahin dekha hai? And this guy, he's like, I could look at his body language. Ye Sardar ne kahan dekh liya? So he says, Saab, aapne pehchan liya sab. Maine bola, I didn't know who he is. I said, dekha to hai. He says, Saab, tusi pehchan lehega. I said, where? He says, sir, I am from Bandipura. That guy from Bandipura is working there in Lahore. It's a total, when I look at the linkage, Pakistan Army, ISI, terrorist group, terrorist network, inimical element, sports system, this is one spine. And ma'am, a very beautiful question which you said. Again, I'm retired, I can attempt it. You said political space. Let me honestly tell you, at all honesty at my disposal, Army is very clear about it. Our task is conventional conflicts, conventional war. We don't like to be in this type of a scenario. It is not good for a professional army. Actually, it takes away from the characteristics of an army man. It takes away from the battle drill, battle procedures, and the barism that you go to have as a soldier. It's a very different challenge, ma'am. That's the reason we raised Rashtriya Rifle, that they should be able to take on this. But believe you me, ma'am, that no army officer, there are three things which I told to you as a youngster when you joined the unit. And they're drilled so hard into you. First is, no politics, don't talk politics. Secondly, don't talk about economy like a Burnia or something. Third is, don't talk about women. And amount of respect which a woman gets from an army man, ma'am, it is too much. If a single lady has come, I must get up. Should I get up now? She just came in. That is what the psychology in the mind is. Army will never, with our history, with our thinking, with our perceptions, has got nothing to do with the political space. Nobody wants a political space. They only want to do the duty that they are meant, and this is a thrill. I have done my service for nearly 40 years, ma'am. Passion and intensity. And my thrill is professionalism. Every time as a corps commander I came back to Flagstaff House in Srinagar, I said, Vaheguru, tera shukar hai. And I said, it is not because of English which I have spoken and learnt in this birth, but it is because of good deeds in the previous birth that I got a chance to do something for my nation. Nation first is my process. Let me tell you, ma'am, because since you raised a very important question, and one wants to go into the depth of it, why you have raised it. To me, I've lived my life with the 5 cardinal principles, honestly. First, nation first. Second is, Constitution is sacred. Third is, faith in democracy. Fourth is, all institutions of governance, administration must function optimally. And the fifth is, center of gravity of our existence is Awam. And that's a beautiful subject which is written.
I thought you were not the army spokesman. Well done, sir. Thank you. Can I ask Aditya to answer the question on how Kashmir may be used to win elections or not?
Well, before I get to that, I think there's a more important question to be addressed. After last Thursday's attack, there were some incidents in Dehradun, and Kashmiri Muslims who are outside of Kashmir in other parts of India have been bullied. Traders in Bihar were, harassed. On social media, of course, that's the easiest way to bully anybody, and a lot of bullying has been going on. And that doesn't help at all. I mean, it only makes Kashmiris, for one, question their place in India. I mean, if it wasn't already questioned. So I think that's something that's more important that has to be addressed than elections. because elections will mean a change of government, and I mean, any government that comes in is not going to make a world of difference to the approach to Kashmir. I think, I mean, we've been seeing, it'll be a little, maybe if there's a different government, it'll be a little more liberal, but I don't know. But what is more important is to change people's attitude. That if a militant or insurgent or terrorist or whatever you want to call it kills armed personnel, paramilitary personnel, you don't go and take it out on students and traders. They have nothing to do with that. And you are just, I mean, it's a cowardly show of patriotism, in my view.
Yes, thank you very much for making that point, Aditya, and I think all of us concur with you.
Yeah, thanks, David.
I certainly do.
The only point I wanted to make was to that young man, but he has gone off. So my only point was that Sujat Bukhari, whoever killed him, he was an asset to the society.
Yes.
And Kashmiri society lost an asset, whatever the reason may be. But anyway, thanks. Back to you, David.
We are running out of time, so maybe throw 2 or 3 quick questions. Yes, very quickly, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. David, you have been you have written a book on Kashmir, intricacies of Kashmir. But we have inherited internationally a colossal heritage which is more or less marred with all problems. There, everything is involved and they don't want any peace to come up. Those international organizations or nations. And lately we have heard that both the establishment of India and Pakistan do not want any solution. So what is your take on the subject when we say that it is an art of warfare which we are learning in Pakistan border, where we had no border before 84?
Right.
So what is your take on the subject?
Since a lot of people seem to be leaving me, I just announce that if any of you have been influenced enough by our discussion to want to purchase copies of the book, they're available outside at a substantial discount. It's priced at $8.95. It is a very large volume, but copies are available for 700 rupees outside. 2 or 3 more questions very quickly. There was one hand there, and but the lady there first. I ask you to. Right, but I think behind you there was a question.
Put the focus from Indo-Pak relations, etc., to Kashmiri people.
Yes, ma'am.
That is most important. But I am addressing my question, which is important, but an observation to the army colonel. The problem in Kashmir just now, I don't know about the history, is that there is too much of army, and we are answering them, their stones, small stones, maybe
Yes.
small stones by bullets. So all your pledging that army does very good, etc.
Right.
Army is in a wrong role. That may be the main reason here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Not mocking anyone. So my analogy might sound very juvenile, but from the past 1 month and so, I'm trying to save my friendship. The prime concern which I see is that nobody's really ready to talk to each other, right? Our media channel has literally created a war room today, right? So I find Imran very convincing. I'm sorry, but he actually said that at least he can come to talk, because by not playing sports or anything, how can we even solve this problem? How can we say that we are doing something? Because right now we can see that Saudi Arabia's flag is flying just with India's flag. So
Right.
we need to see that in the reality.
Thank you.
One is what जो कश्मीर का मकामी मीडिया है, वहाँ के सहाफ़ी हैं, उनका अमन के हवाले से, पीस के हवाले से क्या है? What is the role of the local media? What role are it actually playing vis-a-vis furthering the cause of peace? And the other question is it too much of a pipe dream at this point, especially soon after the Pulwama attack, to hope that one day we will have a loose South Asian Federation, because सरहद जो है मिटाई तो नहीं जा सकती, लेकिन दूरी करी जा सकती है उनके लिए. तो since Pakistan will never give up its claim, India will never give up its claim, Kashmiri Musliman और Kashmiri Hindu जो हैं, there's no consensus, इख्तिलाफ राय है. तो can we? Is it a pipe dream to hope that there will be a loose South Asian Federation?
Thank you. Just two more there, and then we must wind up with. But yes, sir. Yes.
Sir, I teach successionist movements and federalism and politics at the university. I have some understanding on Kashmir issue. So, as long as Kashmir problem remains, the rift between India and Pakistan, rift between India and China will remain.
Right.
And the accusations and counter-accusations are there that India is engineering some movements in Balochistan. And Pakistan is indirect war with India all the time. From 1948 to 2018, there are so much things are going on.
Right.
So, what is your, do you see a solution to Kashmir problem in the foreseeable future?
Okay. Yes, sir.
David, I have read all the citizens' report. You know, citizens group have been going to Kashmir and they have produced reports. I have read all of them. But the basic framework they have adopted is to keep Kashmir within India. But what I find from my interaction with some Kashmiri groups is that they are not interested in being part of India. They want independence. And that's what they are fighting for. They are willing to die for it. They are not interested in... That is precisely what Shujat Bukhari was trying to make on that day. I was present in that meeting. Shujat shouted that Kashmiris hate India. Of course, Farooq Abdullah will not agree with him. But that is a basic tendency that is emerging within Kashmir, which I think we need to investigate. We have to talk to those people who are fighting for independence and reflect their point of view in a more very, very convincing and serious manner.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good note to end on, that we need to talk and we need to open up, because we get, even from the questions and the comments, very, very different points of view and questions framed from a very different point of view. One says, what about removing 35A? And another saying, oh, but they want independence entirely. What do we do with that? I personally have been very, very taken up with the idea that was mentioned regarding a more cohesive, united South Asia with perhaps more flexible borders, an idea which Mr. Vajpayee had tried to promote very, very strenuously, tirelessly, despite several setbacks. But that seems to be becoming more and more difficult. We're living in a more and more polarized world. The situation in both India and Pakistan seems to have become more and more, people have dug their heels in on stands which are irreconcilable, apparently. But one must hope for the best. My sense is that we are in for a bad time, that there is no getting around the fact that very violent and unstable period is upon us. But I still hope that we can work towards creative solutions, and they have to be creative. With that, allow me to end. Thank you very much for having come and been so enthusiastic.
We have tea outside.
Please join us for a cup of tea, and if you'd like to buy a book, copy, that's available too for